And hello everyone, welcome to the MGN Football Tailgate Report. Week 4 already. Year has absolutely flown by. Nate Dreyer, Chandler Timmer, and the Grandville Bulldogs remain undefeated on MGN Air so far. This season they win the border war against Hudsonville and take home the big backyard rivalry in a really, really good game. We'll have plenty to get to in that point. Look ahead to this week as well as Grandville has West Ottawa. We'll do our weekly rankings, everything else. And we've got a great interview coming up on this show as well with Grandville's senior defensive back and play some tight end too, Thru Hungerford. So really terrific interview there as well. And we've got a lot to get to, but CT, we start 40 to 29 Grandville over Hudsonville. The Bulldogs go to 3-0. Hudsonville falls to 0-3, of course. The schedule, so much of that story. But again, it's another double-digit win for Grandville, another impressive win. And I think if people already weren't starting to jump on and say, okay, this Grandville team might actually be something, like we've been saying for a couple weeks now, I think more and more are starting to get on board with it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they can continue to pass pretty much every test that's put in front of them. Another game where, yeah, it's a double-digit win, a couple scores there, but there's a couple times Hudsonville made some big plays. Kind of felt like they were going to jump back into the game. Of course, they were kind of chasing that extra point, 2-point conversion that they decided not to go for most of the game. That kind of felt like the Bulldogs had a bigger lead than what they probably even did. But I mean, for the most part, the offense jumped out to a quick early lead again. They continued to not miss a beat, give themselves some breathing room, and then when the defense did give up a couple big plays, they had enough to where Hudsonville really never threatened the lead.
Yeah, and we can kind of talk about some of that later too, but it was definitely a weird feeling game, for lack of a better term, to some extent, because yeah, it definitely felt bigger than it was in terms of the lead. There were even some points with the lead maybe felt smaller than what it was. I mean, you think about it, like end of the first half, if it weren't for Hudsonville scoring that one late last touchdown, I mean, Grandville's up 2 scores going into 2 touchdowns going into the halftime break. So definitely a weird game for sure, I think on the whole, but it's just a solid game. Again, another double-digit win for Grandville. That is kind of the main thing that came out of it. In terms of team-wide talking points, you look at the Bulldogs kind of drilling down some of the individual performances, which we'll do the main huddle highlight film that we normally watch, not up yet. So we're just going to put Jaden Terry's stuff up because he always has great highlights. So we'll just have something running behind us so you can see some of the things from the Grandville 40-29 when we'll talk about Jaden for sure. First, though, going to talk about Tyson Mann. 3 more touchdowns. Suffers an injury, though. He's out for a lot of that second half. It's like a leg injury. We're going to find out, hopefully, the severity and stuff of it going forward. And hopefully he does not miss any more time. And as an aside, I feel like not great. I mean, I feel like there's a little bit of a faux pas anyway on my own part that I asked him about his health so far on the year and how he dealt with an injury last year and said, how important it is for you to stay healthy. He talked about his goals with health, and of course that means he got hurt in that next game. So, yeah, certainly, hopefully Tyson is going to be okay because, I mean, what a season he is off to. Had the pick, had 3 touchdowns. We had 9 total touchdowns right now. I mean, it's amazing. When they needed yards, he got them. He was the engine driving that train early on.
Yeah, I mean, we thought maybe we'd seen the best from the week ago, and he came right back out and looked like he was going to beat what his performance was the week before that. I mean, continues to find the end zone at a crazy rate. I mean, pretty much every time they're in the red zone near the goal line, it's been Tyson Mann scoring the ball. So, I mean, he continues to really provide for the offense when they're calling upon him. And, a devastating injury there. Hopefully he doesn't miss too much time. I mean, obviously we've talked about some of the depth in the playmakers. You've already seen some of those guys step up, so you kind of the talent's there in a potential absence. But, yeah, you hope that you've seen the playmaking ability on both sides of the ball, special teams. We've talked about it quite a bit, and you definitely, if he misses any time, gonna have a gap there that they're missing.
Yeah. And you do talk about some of the depth. And let's look at what happened after he went out kind of midway through that second half, some of the guys that took over. You're seeing highlights of one of those guys, Jaden Terry, who was just really solid. Had another touchdown, which has become the norm for him throughout his freshman career so far. We saw a lot of Easton Sadinsky kind of filling into Mann's role. And remember, Sadinsky can do a lot of the same things in the pass game as Mann. He's even a little bit bigger body than Mann. Like, there's definitely a lot of potential there, but again, he's a sophomore. Kopko was somewhat bottled up all night. Hudsonville always have been really good at stopping the fullback trap plays and kind of forcing the other backs to have to maybe have more room to run with. But I think you'd first talk about Jaden Terry because, he then had to be called on to the guy to get the ball, get the yard when it's needed late in the game, kind of help put it away, had the touchdown, had a couple of 2-point conversions as well. So really, really solid game. I'd say maybe Jaden's best game. Yeah, he had a couple touchdowns against Grand Blanc, but I think in terms of what he was asked to do, this was the best game we've seen out of Jaden Terry so far.
Yeah, I don't think that's out of the question. I think, maybe the highlight play, the big play that jumps out at you wasn't there, but it was the workload that you talk about that once Tyson Mann went down, he was kind of the guy, the workhorse back, the lead back, if you want to call it that, to where he was getting those important carries on third and fourth downs, and then the crunch situations where they're trying to run the clock out and control the ball. He was the guy getting those carries, and that's huge for a freshman. We've already seen the growth from the playmaking ability. He's been there the whole time. You continue to see that, and see as his role now increases, he's kind of stepping up and taking over.
Yeah, and, we're going to see Kopko, Sadinsky. Hopefully hopefully the Bulldogs will get Junie Figueroa back in the next couple weeks as well, because we'll get to see what he can bring to the table. We saw some Reed Graverson in week 1. So certainly, if Tyson is out for any time beyond just the end of that Hudsonville game, they have got a lot of different guys they can call on. And they do have a game against Hudsonville to try to get things right, against West Ottawa to try to get things right here a little bit. We're going to talk about West Ottawa. This isn't quite the matchup we maybe thought it was at the start of the season. Before they get into the real meat of the schedule, because Caledonia and Rockford are back-to-back weeks following weeks 5 and 6. So, other side of the ball, defense for Grandville. Hudsonville, a team that only scored right around 2 touchdowns each of their first 2 weeks of the year. That mostly was a testament of Saline, Orchard Lake, St. Mary's defense, because they're deep. They can do a lot of things. Also a testament to some of the injuries Hudsonville had. And Grandville saw a very different team than what either Saline or Orchard Lake did, because you talk about Bain coming back. Reardon missed some time. You get those guys. They're kind of some guys on the front line as well. They've been mixing in and out. So Grandville gets the best version of Hudsonville yet. They score 29 points, 2 of which come on a couple deep plays. Drew Hungerford will, I think, do a good job kind of talking about the defensive performance and some of their thoughts on those big plays. But the one touchdown at the end of the half, that kind of was the quick strike that made it the one-score game going into halftime. Talk about Vanderveen as well, got that score in the second half. You take those 2 scores out, and the Grandville defense made a lot of big stops. They forced a turnover, and it was a really, really solid performance. I think you have to look beyond just the fact they gave up 29 points, which is not, modern football. That still is a pretty good defensive performance. I think it's an even better performance than what the final point total says.
Yeah, I think you're right there. I think the one play before halftime was really the only one where you kind of scratch your head just a little bit, and that's a situation where you just don't want to get burned deep, and it really wasn't necessarily burned deep so much. It was a deep route down the field, and then just the run after the catch was pretty impressive by Vanderveen there. So that's the one where it's just like that's a situation where you're trying to avoid that at all costs, and it happened. Other than that, that's a good Hudsonville offense when they're healthy. Yeah. They've got playmakers. Bain was running the football well early on. He got bottled up, but I continue to be impressed by the Bulldogs' defense and the way that they limit the running game. Yeah, they do a great job. The running backs still have not ran the ball against this defense. It's incredible.
Yeah, and I was going to say, we're going to talk about that with West Ottawa this week, too, because West Ottawa can do a lot of similar things to what Grand Blanc did the first week of the year in terms of their offense. So I think Grandville has another really good chance to really stop the run. West Ottawa, even despite that, ran the ball pretty good against Rockford next week, which we'll see. That's another talking point, by the way, going forward, because Rockford gave up a lot of rushing yards against Mona Shore. So maybe there's another side to that beyond, just is West Ottawa a great running team? Rockford maybe issues. We'll see. That's 2 weeks worth of discussions that we're going to be able to have. We talk about the defense. We talk about the offense coming together for me, Chandler. This was a classic Grandville game script. Even if the score wasn't there, even if it was, a game in the 40s and in the 20s, so classic. Grandville ground out yards. They really didn't have one big play. There wasn't one big explosive scoring play like we've seen in the first couple weeks of the year. They ground out nice long drives. The most importantly, or the biggest one that jumps off the page to me was that drive from the middle of the third quarter to the first 2 minutes of the fourth. They took 8 minutes plus 10, 9 minutes off the board, just marching their way down. Then they got points at the end of it, very importantly as well. The defense made stops in moments they needed to make stops. You most notably think about the second drive of the game when it allowed them to go up a couple of scores. You think about the turnover, the interception from Mann, you kind of just look at some of those different things, a couple late stops. Like, it just was the game script that we know Coach Stiegel's Bulldogs and the T and the systems they have, the way they want to play it.
Yeah, and I think we kind of talked about it on the broadcast too, but you kind of see that game script that they're trying to follow early on. We've seen it through most of the first 3 games. Of course, a little bit different when they're playing Hudsonville and it's a rivalry game like that, but I mean, it still was kind of there. You could see it to where early on the offense is moving. They're scoring pretty much every time they touch the football. They're getting out to a big lead. And then once the third quarter after halftime, the offense is still rolling. They're still scoring. They're just eating the clock. And they're taking 3-4 downs, marching their way down the field, the classic Grandville drives that we've seen. And so I think what you have to feel optimistic about as the Bulldogs is that you've kind of seen all aspects of it. You've seen the ability to not necessarily go up tempo, but to move the ball. And when they need to get down the field and they're looking to push a defense a little bit with some of their play, they're able to do that. They're able to march down the field. And then when it's more of a control of the ball situation, they're trying to eat some clock. They can also do that as well. And then and on the defense as well. I mean, the defense has stepped up, made big plays when they've had to, got some stops in some crutch situations where they've been able to get the ball back. And then even when Hudsonville was threatening a couple different times, being able to still come up there. So, I mean, there really hasn't been either side of the football that's been carrying the other, needless to say. So I think that's an optimistic thing.
Yeah, so we're already a third of the way through the year, and I guess we can maybe look at it big picture a little bit as well. So now 3-0, obviously, you may have heard, a team that's climbing everyone's rankings, or should be at this point in time. We get a chance to do so in the next couple weeks. The critical 3-week, the middle part stretch here of the schedule is going to tell us everything. Actually, you please listen the last 3 weeks of the year. But what I was going to say, you don't need to listen. The last 3 weeks of the year, we're pretty much going to know how things are already shaken out into the playoffs after the Rockford game is done. I mean, maybe a little bit of thing here or there could change, but the conference, everything's pretty much going to be settled from Grandville's perspective after week 6. But yeah, you've played 3 very different teams. You have the defending state semifinalist, high-flying offense, spread 4-receiver set type air raid team in Grand Blanc. You have the power, 1, maybe 2 receiver sets, running the ball with a read option down your throat with Byron Center. A little bit in the middle, a little bit of everything with Hudsonville. Like, you've seen some of everything. You've played with a lot of offense. You've played grinding it out. The defense has made stops. The defense has forced a lot of turnovers. That's a very good thing. Like, we've seen them play every kind of team. We've seen them excel playing every kind of team. Like, that's where I think you start to get excited about where this team could be going this year even, let alone all the young pieces moving forward, because we are already seeing what this team can do at their best because they've played every kind of team. They don't seem to have one team that's going to be a significant weakness for them because they beat them all pretty much the same. Yeah,
there's not that obvious matchup that jumps off and like, oh, you're scared of this matchup, or if a team can do this well, that's really going to be a weakness. You really don't see that yet. I mean, that's not saying there's nothing there. There's still some very quality teams coming up that, that are going to test them as well. But yeah, you look at the defense. I mean, I think we've talked about the offense quite a bit and then the way that they're going to dictate a game. But the defense, I mean, they have experience at most positions. They've shut down the run game along the defensive line. They've got players at the linebacker and safety position that can come up and play aggressive. They got the experience in the secondary to where they've limited some serious passing attacks and shut down some matchups on the outside against very good receivers. So, I mean, you look at it and there's just not an obvious mismatch to where a team's going to take advantage of them.
And they're still not completely healthy. I mean, guys like McPherson, Figueroa, will now see the status of Tyson Mann. Hopefully he doesn't miss any time for the Bulldogs, but they're deep still, too. They're still getting healthy at this point in time. I think you mentioned the defense. I want one other point. And you mentioned their ability to stop the run game, in particular the running backs. When you think about this defense the last couple of years, I do think it's fair to say one of the potential weaknesses we've looked at from time to time, our team's power running on them. It's kind of a little bit more, wants to be a little bit more spread out defense, that multiple nature, guys that are playing multiple positions, guys that are, not necessarily tweeners, but kind of made into tweeners because they want the offense to have to be looking at so many different things, and that's been so effective against the pass game. But sometimes we've seen teams that have been able to run it on them. Hudsonville did it last year. Rockford did a little bit, but mostly threw the ball. Obviously, Caledonia, we've seen that, but this year, nobody, regardless of your offense, if you're 4 wide, if you're 2 wide, if you're 3 wide, it doesn't matter. No one's running on this defense, and that's really huge because Rockford's really the only team that's going to want to spread it out and throw it on you. I mean, Caledonia in particular, if they want to just run the ball down your throat, that's huge to me. That maybe the one thing that was a little bit of an issue the first couple of years of getting this defensive system new and in, that's now their strength. It's maybe the strength of the team on the whole is that defensive line and stopping the run game.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking back to week one and against Grand Blanc, and they didn't have much success running the football, and you're thinking, okay, it's just because they're trying to pass the ball. They're not really looking to establish the run game that much. But the more you look back now, it's like it's a growing trend of they're shutting everybody down. If a running back is getting to 20-plus rushing yards, that's a pretty good night for them through the first 3 weeks of the season. And so, I mean, when you're able to take away that option of just being able to run the football, I mean, Hudsonville tried to establish it early on, had a little success, but, I mean, for the most part, just shut down. And then you get teams to completely abandon it because they're just not having success. They're not going to continue running into a brick wall. They're going to try to move the football through the air. And so when you take that element of the run game away, that just it really opens up your defense to play a lot more freely because you know the pass is coming.
Right, absolutely. And again, 40-29, another double-digit win, 3 double-digit wins, multi-score wins in a row for the Grandville Bulldogs to open up this year. And it's West Ottawa this week. At the next segment or a couple segments from now, we will have that West Ottawa preview. Some really interesting things to talk about because Pat Collins has got those boys playing well. They're coming around that program. It's a program I've been saying for a couple years. I think they can turn it around like that. The new stadium, all the energy. You look at the numbers they have in the program for how few numbers they had at the end of Coach Oshnock's reign there. Like, yeah, they turn it around like that. They're back to what they were a few years ago. This is year one of it. They have a lot of the young guys as well. So isn't quite the matchup we maybe expected at the start of this season. So that'll be really interesting. We'll have the coverage of that 6:30 on Friday. Now it's Drew Hungerford. Great interview with the Grandville senior. Go over a lot of different things. He kind of gets into some of the intricacies. We talk so much about this multiple defensive system Grandville plays, how complex it is, what KJ Landis brings. He talks about a little bit of kind of his role in that, helping teach some of the younger guys, bring things around. Some of their strong performances they've had so far this year as a defense, as a team, and on. So we'll step aside when we come back from that. Here's Drew Hungerford.
Daniel the deer danced everywhere. He pranced through fields and jigged through rivers. Then he saw it. What a stage! A place no deer had dared dance before. The hood of a brand new car.
Hey, my car!
And the car was covered, thanks to Farmers Insurance. Deer Dance Floor, December 1st, 2014. Talk to a farmer's agent. We know a thing or two because we've seen a thing or two.
We are farmers. Bum, 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 bum.
Contact the Scott Bates Agency today, 616-531-3441. A proud supporter of MichiganGameNight.com.
I'm Randy Hansen, president of Centennial Securities. I've heard it said that professional coaches measure success in rings, college coaches measure success in championships, and high school coaches measure it in titles. But youth coaches measure success in smiles. At Centennial Securities, we're like the youth coach. Our success is measured by the smiles on the faces of our satisfied clients. If you're a Centennial Securities customer, you know what I mean. If you're not, isn't it about time?
Member SIPC and FINRA.
Welcome back, everyone, to Michigan Game Night and our Captain's Corner segment for the third straight week, getting to talk with one of the members of the Grandville Bulldogs. And today we have senior defensive back, play some tight end as well. It's Drew Hungerford. And first, Drew, thanks for your time this evening, and how are you doing?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm doing good.
All right, well, it is our pleasure to have you on, coming off the first rivalry win of the year for the Bulldogs, as it was a really solid performance, 40-29 over backyard rival Hudsonville. I guess first from a general team perspective, tell us kind of the confidence boost from that game and how you're feeling getting your first OK Red win, and of course also that big rivalry win against a really tough team early in the year.
Yeah, it feels really good. I mean, we've obviously been playing those Hudsonville kids since we're like in first or third grade, so like it was just nice to like kind of end on a win against them my senior year. And then for the team, it's a big confidence booster with the OK Red being so good this year. It's good to get off to a 1-0 start against a really good team. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is as tough as I can, remember. We talk about it every year with the OK Red, but so tough and in the midst of such a difficult stretch right now, which we'll talk about in a minute as well. But sticking with the Hudsonville game, from a defensive perspective, I think when you look at your role in the secondary, Hudsonville, a team that, even though they didn't score a whole bunch of points the first couple weeks of the year, they're such a dangerous team that can do a lot of different things, and they had a lot of injuries and guys that were coming off of injury against you. So, they got a couple of scores. They scored 29 points on the whole, but still a really solid defensive performance, you guys. Get a turnover, got a couple of big stops early and late. So it has to be a really good feeling game for the defense as well, the way that you're coming out of that game against a team that can do a lot of good things.
Yeah, I mean they have a lot of weapons that they can go to on that offense. And like you said, a lot of them were coming back from injury, and we played good defensively. It was just a few big plays here and there that kind of costed us, that led to a few scores. But then at the same time, we were also able to make a few plays with like the pick from Tyson and a few good stops. So it was a good defensive showing. But yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And talking about your role, kind of looking at the whole year and your role kind of starting that secondary, and we saw you come up last year, as a junior and made such big strides throughout the year, quickly developed and started off the year very well as a leader again. And I want to talk about your role as a leader in that secondary. So you've got Tyson and Carson back and kind of splitting some time at safety, but you've got a couple young guys. You've got Cash Ruff. You've got Avon Cott. You've seen some Jaden Terry in the secondary. Tell me about your role, coming in as a defensive back, as a leader back there, as a senior leader, playing every snap along with those young guys, and some of what you're doing to, help bring them along and helping learn what's kind of a complex defensive system in some ways.
Yeah, our defense can get really complex if you don't know the ins and outs of it. And I think with me being able to play all year last year, it really helps me. I feel like I could go out there and call the defense with KJ. I know it so well. So I mean, I feel like mostly the leadership role that helps me is just being able to talk guys through what they're doing, show them what to do, and then they're able to trust me and know that I'll be in the right spot so they can focus on their job the whole time.
Tell me a little bit about the mindset of a cornerback like yourself. When you look at a week like Hudsonville, a week like Grand Blanc, even a couple guys you'll have this week against West Ottawa, going up against these big-time receivers, what kind of is going through your mind coming into these games knowing that you've got big-time weapons on the other side? You have to do a lot to shut them down. I'm sure it's a little bit of trust in everyone else, but also I'm sure you get amped up for that matchup to try to be the shutdown guy on a big matchup on the other side.
Yeah, we've played a lot of good receivers so far this year, and we're only in week 3, so it's been a good test in our secondary. But I think the main goal for our secondary is just we can't let up any huge plays, because those huge plays are not only momentum boosters, but they also times lead to scores. So a lot of times we just try and limit those and then just come up, make tackles when they throw it short, and then just live with those.
Yeah, you kind of talked about the defensive scheme and some of the, the complexity to it. I guess tell us a little bit about the role of a defender playing in this kind of multiple defensive scheme that KJ Landis has brought in the last couple years. I feel like it really is as much of a game of kind of mental gymnastics and being able to be very multiple, fluid in what you do, along with just going out and making a play. I think it really puts you through your paces as a defender and really helps create some interesting matchups because of that.
Yeah, like I said earlier, it's a complex defense, but I think we do a really good job week to week just focusing on certain calls and certain formations, so that then we can, because we have a lot, but we can focus in on 4 or 5 then a week, and then those will best, KJ makes it so those best match up with their offense that they have and puts us hopefully in the best place to win. So
yeah, I know it's so fascinating for us every week to get to watch that cat and mouse game, what you guys as a defense, especially when you think about Hudsonville, because they do so many different things in the middle of a game as well. It was fun to watch that back and forth. Kind of transitioning away from this year on the field, and we'll get to West Ottawa and some of the next matchups in a moment. Just kind of for you, obviously, in your senior year, what kind of are currently some of your plans in terms of college, in terms of kind of academics, where you may be looking? Are you looking at athletics maybe at the next level? What are some of your thoughts right now in the fall of your senior year going forward?
Yeah, so right now I plan on most likely going to study engineering somewhere. I'm not sure where yet,
Okay.
And then athletics-wise, if something comes around here in my senior year, I definitely would be open to taking it. But right now, I'm planning on just focusing on education and getting that degree. So,
okay, what sort of engineering field are you maybe looking at, or just kind of generically thinking engineering at the moment?
I don't know exactly. I think the big goal would be to do some sports engineering type thing. So I could go I don't know, work with sports. So because obviously that's a huge part of my life, playing 3 sports and stuff. So I don't really know exactly what that looks like yet, but hopefully something with that.
All right, well, I can tell you're certainly smarter than me then, if you're even able to think about possibly doing that. There's a reason why I just talk about sports for a lot of what I do right now. All right, let's look ahead. So you guys are in the midst of, one of just a heck of a 4-week stretch right here. And when we looked at the schedule at the start of the year, this West Ottawa game was maybe supposed to be kind of where the schedule relented a little bit. I know Coach Stieg would be the first to, probably shoot me down on saying something like that right there. But the way this team's played early, they were pretty competitive at points in that game with Rockford. I mean, tell me a little bit about this West Ottawa matchup from some of kind of your early prep, some of the things you're looking at. I mean, they certainly are a tough and improved team from last year, and they're going to be really bringing it, I think, and make this 4-week stretch that much tougher.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, like you said, you'd think that this West Ottawa game was supposed to be the easy one, but it turns out that it's probably one of the hardest ones in the 4-game stretch, too, because they played so good recently. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, they run a lot of the base stuff that we like to go over with our defense, a lot of stuff similar that we've played to already. So I feel like we're pretty familiar and comfortable with what they run, and it allows us to do a lot of the stuff we're good at too. So I think that'll make it easier on us to just go out there, play fast, play hard, and hopefully get a win.
I guess you look at the early part of this season, and you've played such a varied amount of offenses as well. You had kind of the spread in your air raid type system that Grand Blanc likes to run, the definite power type system of Byron Center, something in between with Hudsonville. So how much does that help too? Especially, you look at West Ottawa, probably going to spread it out more 3 and a lot of even 4 wide receiver sets, kind of like Grand Blanc. So how helpful has it been to get to see so many different really good offenses to start the year as you go into this stretch of seeing these top teams with, Caledonia, Rockford also now looming?
Yeah, it's very helpful. I mean, there's only so much you can go over with scout teams and stuff, and it's a lot of times you just don't get the real look. So being able to go to Grand Blanc and play Byron and play different types of offenses, like you said, they'll make it a lot easier going to OK Red to not see brand new stuff week to week.
All right, Drew Hungerford with us here on the Captain's Corner segment. Drew, thank you so much for your time tonight. Good luck on Friday night, and can't wait to see the game. Good luck to you and the guys.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right, this has been the Coach's Corner segment. We'll be right back here on MGN.
Welcome back to the Tailgate Report. Nate and Chandler, thanks again, Drew Hungerford, for coming on. Really terrific interview. Great to hear from him. And as I mentioned, much smarter young man than I am, looking at going into engineering at the next level. Also, you mentioned if any sports opportunities come up for him, he'd like to play them. I mean, I'll say this to any coach right now, especially a defensive football coach at the next level, and he's seen him in his other sports as well, what he succeeds in. But I mean, the IQ you can tell he plays with in the secondary, the experience he has, how just solid and steady of a player he is. I think a lot of college programs would certainly love to have him. All right, Grandville, West Ottawa. Chandler. Like we said, coming into the year, this was one of those matchups. Where did you have West Ottawa ranked in your preseason? Did you have them dead last?
I think I did have them dead last.
You had them dead last. I think I had them 6th. I had a little bit more faith in them. And I thought I thought they'd be building. I thought they'd win a game or two. They may even be on the outskirts of the playoffs at the end. Well, now, here we are, a couple big wins. They even played decently against Rockford. We'll get some of those highlights up behind us in just a moment when we're talking about what they do. But what we thought would be the down game in the middle of one of the hardest 4-week stretches you could imagine, I mean, it's not much of a down game whatsoever. We say that every year in the OK Red, but now if West Ottawa's back to being a team you don't want to play, it makes it that much tougher.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible when you look at the depth of the OK Red Conference, where the last couple of years when West Ottawa was struggling to win a game, they were the kind of the one that you get right against them and not necessarily chalk it up as a win, but pretty close to it when they had not been winning football games. But yeah, I mean, the way that they've responded now to a new system, new coach there, they're on the rebuild and looking dangerous for a team that's now won a couple games. And even though they lost to Rockford, they definitely have something building.
No, it's amazing. I mean, you look at the Red, just want to talk in general. So you got Grandville, Rockford, Caledonia, kind of that top echelon. I think most would have. Hudsonville certainly could win some games and find their way right back there. East Kentwood looks great this year. They're back. And then West Ottawa winning. I still think Jennison's an okay team. Grand Haven. So like it's interesting when you look. I mean, you know what? To be fair to Grand Haven, they scored 40+ points. I think against against Traverse City West, as well. So like they can do it. Like if you put them outside the red, they're a good team. They're not going to win a game in the red, but if you put them outside the red, they're a good team. So it is so tough when you look at what it brings to the table, and the West Ottawa bringing more depth. I told myself after last week I wasn't going to get myself in trouble with anything on the show again, and here I go. Let's talk about West Ottawa, okay? The importance of
kind of every game for West Ottawa, you look at their season, this is big picture, talking about this team, where they're at, why this is a big matchup. So, this has always been a little bit of a rivalry the last few years. Grandville, West Ottawa, going back to kind of those Tyler Bosma-type basketball teams, Xavier Wade teams on the football field in kind of 17, 18, 19 in that sort of run. That rivalry might be back. We saw it on the basketball court last year, of course, ending in the district championship game. We look at West Ottawa. They have 2 wins already. Very likely, Grand Haven, we talked about, probably going to be a winnable game for them. They have Jenison the last week of the year. That could be a really big game for them. So they have to find one more win. Against this tough part, they already have Rockford in the rear view. If they can find one more win, this is a playoff team. Right now, they are currently in the playoffs. We're very early on. But, that's, I think, the thing for them is you're looking at a team, if you get to 5 wins with their schedule, you're a playoff team for all intents and purposes. That's why these games are important. A little bit of rivalry. We want to kind of show you we've always played Grandville tough in the past. Plus, they need to find a win. East Kentwood may be the most likely, or Hudsonville, you would say. But they need to find one more win outside of the teams left that they're expected to beat.
Yeah, I think, kind of cool for West Ottawa, the fact that, they've kind of got those games again. For a while there, to think that they were going to steal a game against one of the top teams in the Red was pretty much out of the question. There was a chance they were going to win a game here and there, but to say you're going to beat one of the top teams in the Red was likely not going to happen. But now they're in a position where they're winning a couple games against some of the teams that they could be competitive against and had a chance to win. And now you're talking about a team that kind of has some momentum a little bit. They've won some football games now. It's not crazy to say that they could sneak up and beat a team at the top of the Red, and before you know it, you're talking about a team that's right on the verge of the playoffs.
Right, and then, they beat a team at the top of the Red, and then things get even more interesting because if the rest of the top of the Red cannibalizes itself, all of a sudden now, if you get a couple other losses, now all of a sudden they're just maybe a game back of winning the Red because things could be so crazy, and I think they will be so crazy at the top going forward, the next week. It's so tough that for a lot of these teams, if you're kind of the second or third best team in the conference when all shakes out, if you go 1-3 against these other top teams, you actually do pretty well because it's just, I think everyone's going to just beat each other. It's going to be crazy. So this team, Pat Collins, second-year head coach, we know the system. We know his name, of course, so well. Been at Montague for decades, really. And his son, Drew, won the championship his senior year. Pat moves on, comes back to West Ottawa where he started his coaching career. Chandler, we talk a lot about spread systems, talk a lot about air raid versus spread versus power spread. We talk about Grand Blanc as a archetype for what we're going to see. This is 3, if not 4 wide receiver sets almost exclusively. Every once in a while, they'll utilize Ryan Stam, their fullback, in there. But for the most part, they're 4 wide. They're spreading out. They're going to run through zone looks, but they're mostly looking to dink and dunk you a lot of the time, then find the deep shot over the middle. They're trying to spread the field.
Yeah, definitely trying to get the ball out quickly. We've seen this Panthers team has had a ton of talent at the wideout position in years past. And again, maybe not some of that top talent, but again, a lot of playmakers on the outside that they're going to try to get the football out to. We'll see how committed they stay to that short passing game if they can stick to it for a full game plan against the Bulldogs.
And they did run the ball pretty well in some of their past weeks, I will say, but also I think Grandville's the best run defense, frankly, they have seen, especially against a team that doesn't bring extra blockers in and do some of those things. So it's going to start with their senior quarterback, Cole Telguski. Second year, very athletic quarterback. You especially see he's a true dual threat, and he's going to have to throw the ball a lot to make things work. He's got a lot of big targets on the outside we're going to talk about that he can hit, but it's going to start with him because with an offense that's set up 3-4 wide every single play, normally 4 wide, it's obviously in the quarterback's hands.
Yeah, definitely. If he's going to have a good night, he's going to have to be accurate throwing the football. A lot of that's going to be short throws, and they're going to try to get him into a rhythm. And for the most part, the Bulldogs have been willing to give up those underneath throws. It's just going to be how much are they going to try to stretch the field? Are they going to try to go vertically a little bit more? Or are they going to be able to just dink and dunk down the field? And Telguski's going to be a big part of that.
You can see the highlights. This is a long run, but just a lot of 15, 14-yard passes. They're creating that space in just the first down territory, running across field. Some of the things you kind of think about the modern kind of vertical spread type teams like, Kansas City, I think, is the most well-known top of mind that runs those 4 receiver sets, and Mississippi State and on at the lower levels. The thing that sticks out to me here, though, this is a Rockford discussion. They score only 13 points, but they have 384 yards, and they run for 188. So despite that, they're able to run the ball. I don't know if that's a West Ottawa thing we're going to learn about that, and they are big on the offensive line. Even though they don't have extra blockers, they're big on the offensive line. I don't know if we're going to learn, is that a West Ottawa thing, or are we learning something about Rockford in terms of ability or lack thereof to stop the run game? And that's a different talking point for a later day, for sure, once we get closer to that game. But Caden Forbes, their second-year sophomore, we talk about the run game. We saw him last year as a freshman. Tough, hard runner, has some good speed as well. 3 touchdowns, I believe, now on the year. This is the guy that he's going to run a lot of those kind of draw-type looks, zone looks, with trying to get into the space of the defense. He's a little bit of a bowling ball type that also is really shifty. If they are going to be able to establish any sort of the run, and they do utilize, I mentioned Ryan Stamm, their senior, as a bit of a fullback every once in a while, it's going to come down to Forbes really having to shoulder things in the run game, and he's one of the most talented backs as a sophomore. A couple good sophomore and freshman running backs in this game, but he's going to have to shoulder a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it's when you spread the field out like that with multiple receivers, I mean, it's a lot on the running back. If you're going to stay with the running game really to any aspect, they're going to have to make guys miss one-on-one. I mean, that's what it's going to come down to. You've got the field spread out, theoretically more room to run on the inside, and so far the Bulldogs have done a fantastic job of controlling those gaps and winning those and making those tackles when they've needed to in the trenches. And so it comes down to a running back like that can he find his way through a couple holes? Can he make something happen if they're going to stick with the running game and be able to against the Bulldogs?
Similar story to last week, big targets out wide. You mentioned they go 4 wide. Well, all these guys are 6 foot plus. I mean, you look at, Harrison 6'2", Janetsky 6'2", 6'3", and there Bryce Baldwin, of course, is 6'4", 180 pounds or so out wide. So they've got a lot of big guys all around that are the receivers, guys that can block a little bit as well. That's kind of part of the system. Matt Harrison he's almost like a tight end receiver combo. He's kind of the guy that'll motion and they'll use as kind of that blocker a lot of times, coming out of the slot with almost the build of a tight end still, and is pretty active in the pass game too. But again, it's that talking point. Big targets for West Ottawa, big cornerbacks for the Bulldogs. It's the same matchup that we kind of saw last week. And last week, Grandville won some, West Ottawa won, or Hudsonville won some. It's going to be a similar kind of push and pull.
Yeah, I think you're going to see some more back and forth there as well. It's going to be a good battle. I think when you talk about size, you're not just talking about one guy on the outside that's got size. You're talking about multiple weapons like that. So, I mean, it's not just a matter of shutting down one of the big targets. The defense has to respect multiple wideouts there that can catch the football. And so, yeah, I mean, you're going to get some one-on-ones like what we saw. You're going to see some tremendous plays in the secondary, I think, where the Bulldogs are going to be winning some plays. You're going to see some times where the West Ottawa receivers are making plays and going up and getting the football and then making something happen. So I think, a similar test to what the Bulldogs have seen a couple times already, and they've been able to capitalize off of it.
West Ottawa defensively, I don't think we fully know what they're going to do because they've played so many teams that throw the ball a lot. I think Vandenhout threw the ball 34 times. They stopped. I think he was semi-inefficient for the first time this year too, just a little bit above 50%. But he threw it nearly 35 times, I think, last week, somewhat similar in some of their first matchups as well. So this is a team, talk about spread offense, or kind of spread defense. They like to stay in those nickel-type packages, maybe with that extra defensive back out there, and they've got some kind of hybrid guys, do some similar things to Grandville, mostly out of a base 3-down lineman front set. So we don't fully know what they're going to look like. We can just go to history. If I remember off the top of my head, I think they have traditionally been more of a 3-down lineman, 2 standing edge, 1 high safety, or maybe 2. I think 1 traditionally against Grandville. We have to remember a different defense than what every other broadcast team has to remember for these teams. So they traditionally have done that pretty basic. They know what they're doing to stop the T, or to compete with the T. I think Grandville still has scored very effectively on them, even when both teams were good. I think West Ottawa's issues always sometimes were defensively against the T. So, yeah, we'll see. We don't really know a defense that's made some good plays. They've got some good, really young players all around the field. Ryan Stamm, their big middle linebacker, talked about him as a fullback. He'll be in the middle of everything. He's going to be the leader. A good, big front defensive line as well, but a lot of question marks as we always have against Grandville in terms of the other team's defense.
Yeah, I mean, it's the classic, what are you going to do against the T? I mean, I think a team that traditionally likes to spread it out a little bit more on the offensive end, on the defensive side, typically is probably going to have more guys that are secondary type players that are going to be more effective against the passing game. And so, yeah, what kind of adjustments are they going to make personnel-wise in order to get some different bodies in there and then create some better matchups for themselves and trying to shut down the power of what the Bulldogs are going to try to do.
And I think the one thing they have to be careful with is I think Grandville is due for busting a trap play for a touchdown because last week Hudsonville really started blitzing both A-gaps like teams like to do against the run and trying to time that up and shutting it down, and Grandville just kind of kept poking away at it, but they never were able to get Kopko on one of those trap plays with everyone crowded in. They had a couple against Byron Center. I think that's one thing that is out there. I think Grandville's very due for having one of those plays really bust open and do something big. I believe. So we'll see. It's always interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's just a matchup where we have a lot of question marks still going into it. We don't fully know what West Ottawa is going to look like on either side of the ball. I'm curious to see what the answer will be.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think it's the Bulldogs have had the better resume to this point, but you're kind of dealing with an unknown where it's a West Ottawa team that's kind of found a new element. They've finally won a couple games, and they're feeling dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. I think that's a good overview on this one. Grandville, West Ottawa, 6:30 p.m., michigansportsradio.com/MGN, michigangamenight.com/live, Michigan Sports Radio app. We'll have streams on our Facebook, on our Twitter. What I say last week, if you can't find it, that's a you problem. I won't say that because that's mean, but hopefully you can find it somewhere. Look forward to it. Should be a really interesting matchup back at Bulldogs Stadium. Oh, it's homecoming, by the way. Didn't talk about that. I mean, the energy also, a little bit of a rivalry game. West Ottawa's juiced up. Grandville's feeling good. I think the homecoming helps with maybe not having a letdown in there as well. It's, a team that's not huge senior-led by the Bulldogs, but they've got some really big pieces at senior that I think is going to be a really important game for them.
Yeah, I mean, anytime you've got homecoming like that for the high school team like that, it's going to be some energy around the stadium and just naturally going to be built up a little bit more and things hyped up. Not that you necessarily need that against a West Ottawa team that is already a bit of a rivalry, but I think that motivation naturally would be there now as well.
We'll be on the Grandville YouTube, Grandville Athletics YouTube too. I forgot about one more way you can watch and listen to us, and we'll make sure we unplug from that in time so everyone can tune in to the post game. I'm assuming that they'll be doing the homecoming stuff after the game, so we'll make sure we unplug for that. And you can, if you want to keep listening to us, listen to our stream. But otherwise, whatever. Okay, we're gonna step aside. When we come back, time to do some rankings. What's going on in the OK Red? What's going on in the whole area? Playoff projections as well. We'll get into some of that as that's already started thanks to Snooze to You. He already got his first ones out, so we're going to talk about it because whenever he gets something out, I like to talk about it. We'll be right back.
The sinister cries haunted Mary through the night. Dawn neared, and still the voice tormented her. She ran towards the safety of her car, flung open the door, and a coyote had somehow gotten locked inside. But the damaged interior was covered, thanks to Farmers Insurance. Coyote Carpool, August 1st, 2015. Talk to a farmer's agent. We know a thing or two because we've seen a thing or two.
We are farmers. Bum, 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 bum.
Contact the Scott Bates Agency today, 616-531-3441. A proud supporter of MichiganGameNight.com.
Can you identify your number one personal trait? The thing that you do better than most others? If not, this may be a good time to think this through. If you're really good at writing, then why use the phone? If you're great on the phone, why use email? If you have exceptional human relation skills, why sit back and let others lead? I'm Randy Hansen, president of Centennial Securities Company. Playing to our strengths is something we do very well at Centennial. And if you're already a customer, you know what I mean. If not, isn't it about time?
Member SIPC and FINRA.
Welcome back to the Tailgate Report. Nate Chandler. All right, time to rank. Time to look at some things. SnoozeToYou.com. Of course, if you're in the Grandville area, you know Snooze. He's always there. And he has his first already things out for the year. So we look at Division I, Region 1. Hopefully you can kind of read it. You probably can't, though. This screen just has not worked the way I thought it would, but guess what? Not a quitter. So Division I, Region 1, District 1, Rockford, West Ottawa, Grandville, Grand Rapids Union. Of course, such an interesting story to start the year. Caledonia, Holt, East Kentwood, Grand Ledge. That's really kind of the main thing you talk about. Caledonia, East Kentwood already in District 2 here. I think the teams where they are kind of how it's going to settle out a lot. West Ottawa going to have an interesting thing to say. Union, I don't know. It's going to be curious the way things based on who qualifies. Of course, Hudsonville, I'm sure, is going to find their way into the battle with things here. But the question is, you've got the Union question this year because they're going to keep winning. They're probably going to get themselves enough playoff points, so it mixes things up quite a bit this year.
Yeah, it does. It just creates a little different matchup in some of those districts.
We're not going to see Traverse City West week 1, unfortunately, this year.
Some of those names that have been there for the last couple of years might finally get a change as to some of the names there. But, yeah, I think for the OK Red purposes, I think we talked about West Ottawa and what their path to the playoffs is and trying to beat some of the teams. I still think Hudsonville, too, could be right there. I think that's kind of the matchup there you're looking at. yeah, I mean, East Kentwood, after their strong start, finds themselves in a spot where they're in the playoffs. And of course, Caledonia, Rockford, Grandville all still have to play each other, so those teams are going to beat up on each other as well.
Yeah, for sure. And, we'll just quickly buzz through things. So, Forest Hill Central, Byron Center right now. Mona Shores, Reese Puffer sitting at number 3 right now. I mean, of course, that's the main one we're talking about. This Mona Shores, Forest Hill Central, Byron Center. Going to be a fascinating match with their Byron Center lost to Forest Hill Central. We'll get to that in some of our OK Power 6 Division 3. Stop me if you see something immediately interesting. I guess this is probably what to talk about. So Lowell undefeated. They're still 1. Coopersville lost. They're in there. Zeeland West, Muskegon, one heck of a battle. This would be, I don't think we see it. I think Zeeland West will be 1 eventually. But Lowell's looked really good early on. This is always the D3 West Michigan district is always the real meat grinder, and it is again.
Yeah, I mean, you see some of the names on there, and yeah, it's just a loaded district. I mean, as you said, I don't think that's the matchup we get in the first round, but still, those two teams potentially being right there, 2 very solid teams.
And Muskegon, I mean, still 50 to 51 points that Zeeland West has, even with that loss on there. So, such a tough start to the year for Muskegon in terms of the schedule, puts themselves in good position. Whitehall 1, Holland Christian's in there. South Christian, Grand Rapids Christian hanging at 3. Forest Hills Eastern, 3-0, good start to the year for them. Hanging in there here in Division 4. Division 5 is where things, of course, are different in the area than they have been, because notably right now, as you run through D4 and D5, actually that's D4 is where Unity traditionally was. That's the point I was going to make, but I don't know what I'm talking about. So they're out of there. This is normal. Catholic Central, Belding, of course, unbeaten, still hanging in there. Again, the Comstock Park Catholic Central matchup set up. Oak Ridge is good. And then really the main talking point is West Catholic, down to D6 this year, and right now they're playing Buchanan week 1. So West Catholic has 55.3 playoff points.
Got pretty much everybody in the district doubled up in points right now.
That's going to be something. Shout out to the Michigan Sports Radio West Catholic broadcast team, because what a fun start to the playoffs that's going to be for them, because it's not going to change much. Yeah. So that's a look at, of course, news2u.com. Everyone else go buzz around, check it out. I'm sure you will. I know I always manage to find a lot of time to waste there once things are out. And thank you to Snooze for already having that stuff out this early in the year, so people like us can sit here and talk about something that's only 3 weeks in. We have 3 games of 9, and we're already starting to talk about, look at this matchup. And again, there are 6 football games to play before there's actually a single matchup, which is 2 times as many as we've had. But you know what? We're going to talk about it. Okay, Red, you ready to rank?
Yes.
You know the drill. We'll go bottom 3. Yeah, you know the drill. I will begin. Last place, OK Red, Grand Haven. 7th place, Jenison. 6th place, I still have West Ottawa here. I think you may be the one to get funky with it. We'll see what you're doing. But, at the end of the day, I'm kind of going off how many games they've won, at least what they've looked competitive in. I still have Grand Haven at the bottom at this point in time. A really rough start for them against East Kentwood last time out. So I got them at the bottom. West Ottawa, a couple wins already on the year, played decently against Rockford, kept it close early. So that's where I'm at for the bottom 3.
Yeah, unfortunately for Grand Haven, got shut out against East Kentwood, as you said. They're kind of growing further to the bottom, unfortunately for them, of the OK Red power rankings here for me. So yeah, I've got them 8 by a pretty distant margin here. Then I've got West Ottawa 7 and Jenison 6. So
talk about just dying on the hill.
Yep, no, I'm gonna stick with it. It's not that I hate West Ottawa that much. I think and maybe after seeing them in person this week, maybe that's what it's gonna take to change my mind here a little bit. I'm still just not fully buying into West Ottawa being. I don't think necessarily that Jenison's that much
beating
better.
2 good teams already isn't enough for you.
No, I still have to see
solid teams.
I still just feel like head to head, Jenison is maybe just
we'll find
barely.
out.
Yeah.
We'll certainly find out. Middle ones. This is where I'm curious actually what you're going to do. My guess is we'll probably stay pretty similar on how things were, because we've had kind of one discrepancy how we've been ranking this conference versus how everyone's ranking the area, and it comes around at least my number 3 spot. So I have Hudsonville dropping to 5. I mean, they still haven't won yet, and I know how tough it is and whatever and the competition, but at some point in time, I mean, because the team just above them, I have East Kentwood at 4, keeps winning and keeps looking really good. I have to keep moving East Kentwood up at this point in time, and I have to put them over Hudsonville, which I know I picked them to win the conference. And then 3, I do have Caledonia, and I know everyone in the area has them number 1. I know rankings around the state have them top 2-3 team in the state. I know their offense is scoring 50-plus points per game on the year. I know all of those things, but I still like the 2 teams above them more, I think.
Yeah, no, we have the same 3 in the same exact order there.
Okay.
I'm going to take credit, though,
It's
for being
more boring.
Yeah, no, I'm going to take credit, though, for being a week early on that. I did have East Kentwood ahead of Hudsonville last week. You probably thought that was maybe crazy, but no, I had it right, I think. So I've got, Hudsonville, I still think, going to be on the verge of the playoffs if they can turn things around. East Kentwood looking like a playoff team again with the hot start that they've had. Growing in confidence of what East Kentwood is now that they've kind of strung it together for more weeks. It wasn't just a fluke against Muskegon week 1. It's starting to look like they actually are improved. And then I've got Caledonia 3 as well. I mean, I'm starting to feel a little crazy because, you see everybody else that has them number 1 and by quite a bit. Mm-hmm. I still have to see it head-to-head against Rockford and Grandville first of the season. I think not that they're a bad team at all. I just think those 3 are so close. I'm going to stick with the order I had.
So the only thing we might have learned week 1, that East Kentwood-Muskegon game, that wasn't a fluke, is that Muskegon, we'll talk about that in a minute, but I mean, Muskegon continues to just not beat teams the way we thought Muskegon would beat teams for the first couple weeks of the year here. So, that leads us to the top 2. Last week he had Rockford 1, Grandville 2. I had it flipped because I've just really been riding what Grandville's been able to do in the early part of the season in terms of who they've beaten, and I'm going to have to stick the same way. And I will also say I genuinely believe Grandville's wins, I believe the competition's, I think Grandville's schedule's been harder so far, and I think Grandville's had more impressive wins. The Grand Blanc win, games that were never really in question. The Grand Blanc, it was multiple scores, early in the game, really, but in terms of second half, games that were never really in question. Grand Blanc, Byron Center, Hudsonville, controlled those games. Rockford had the crazy comeback against Mona Shores, and of course Mona Shores unbelievably good. That's probably the best team, right there with we'll see what Grand Blanc is at the end of the day. But I think Grandville has had 3 harder games than Rockford, and I think they've been more impressive in 3 wins so far. So that's my thinking why I'm going to keep Grandville ahead of Rockford. And everything could get blown up this week, next week, the week after. But for right now, that's what I'm going off of. Through 3 weeks, Grandville's, I believe, had a harder schedule and had 3 more impressive wins. Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I really do. I think you make a strong argument. It's passionate, at least. But no, again, it goes back to the head-to-head thing, and the Bulldogs fans don't need to hear me tell them that Rockford has been a bit of the kryptonite throughout the last couple seasons. And so when both teams are looking great early in the season, I'm going to go back to what I've seen, and unfortunately for the Bulldogs, that is Rockford being at number 1, Grandville at number 2. I'm ultimately looking forward to that game. I cannot wait for what that's going to be and what that's going to determine for the OK Red. I just think for now, if you're arguing wins, I still put the Rockford win over Mona Shores pretty high up there. When you're talking about resume, that was a close game, more than what the Bulldogs have played. But I still think the talent's there, and again, 2 teams very close. So I'm not going to say that it's a huge gap there. But no, I agree. That is definitely, and I think it's a little bit of projection versus kind of the theory of projection versus more the theory of what we've already seen. Right. You are projecting knowing what we've always seen out of Rockford going down the stretch, some of the Grandville struggles, so on and so forth. And that makes sense, looking at the individual game of Mona Shores being the best versus looking at the total resume of Grandville has not had a letdown game whatsoever. Rockford has had a not very good East Grand Rapids team, realistically. They've had a middle-of-the-road, maybe playoff team, but we'll see West Ottawa team that if they make playoffs, it's because they're going to beat hopefully one of those top-tier teams. That's what they've had. Grandville has had, Hudsonville, who's the best 0-3 team we've seen in a long time. Byron Center, who, they're 1-2 now, but I think they're going to be very good by the end of the season. And then Grand Blanc, I think, is starting to really come on now the last week or so. So, it's close, and I think it's closer than what a lot of people think between these 2. And again, we have them both above Caledonia still. We have reasons behind that, I think, and we may learn that we're completely wrong because, again, I think Mason McKenzie has entered the Mr. Football for the State Champs Award. He's entered the watch list for that. So, we might just be very wrong. You got a couple D1 guys there in terms of the wing back and the running back there. So, yes, we'll see. It's so tough. Honestly, I would say right now, and I know there's a lot of East Side people, and I know, of course, the Catholic League and the OAA and so forth. I'm not sure. We talk about the depth of the OK Red, yes, which is the deepest it's been in 3-4 years or more. I don't think there's a conference in this state with a better top three than the OK Red, and I'll stick to that.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. I mean, the OK Red for years has had a lot of teams that are right on the verge of the playoffs. But yeah, I think when you're talking about top-tier talent and teams that can really realistically make a run, I mean, I think you're talking about three of the better teams we've seen come out of the Red in a while.
You have two teams that a lot of people are talking about as state championship teams in Rockford and Caledonia, and a Grandville team that I think might be better than those two teams that no one's talking about yet. So that's what you're talking about, three teams that are deep run. Now, they're going to take each other out fairly early on in the playoffs, but whoever comes out of that mess, like I think whoever between Grandville, Rockford, Caledonia, in that kind of region, whoever wins that, I mean, you look at what's ahead, you think of kind of who they're going to have to play. I don't know, I think Ford Field's the cards for whoever the top of those three teams are, and I don't want to, that might be my little bold prediction to stake my claim to. I think the top, whoever comes out of that region, with those three teams, I believe will go to Ford Field. And at this point, 3 weeks in the year, I think I feel somewhat comfortable in saying that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's too crazy either. I think if we really want to get far out there, I mean, you talk about the OK Red Power Conference and what we've talked about. I mean, the good news for these teams is that if they take care of business in the regular season, which all three look like they're well on their way to doing so, they're going to kind of have that revenge game, if you want to say that. True. Second time where if one of these teams drops a game versus one of the other two or in the regular season, it's looking like we're going to get those three all headed in a collision course of some sort in the playoffs as well, where they're going to have that second chance.
And the playoffs are going to be mixed up because, again, these teams are, unless one does wind up running the table, goes unbeaten, they're all going to have one loss. One might have two losses. Like, it's going to be kind of mixed up with how the playoffs look ultimately as well. All right, OK Power 6 now. This is our top team in each of the OK Conference subdivisions. Again, we just stick with the OK Conference. Don't get too deep into the weeds elsewhere. OK Red, we just talked about it. I'm still going to have Grandville 1. You're going to have Rockford 1. And we've talked that one, of course, to death, I think, at this point in time in terms of whereas we could continue to talk to death. OK Green, I'll let you go first. This has been an interesting one to watch so far. I'm curious. I had Zeeland West last week. Curious if you're going to come over quite yet or if Mona still is number one.
Yeah, I'm sticking with Mona Shores for right now. I think Zeeland West being undefeated and I believe 15 points total allowed. So, I mean, some crazy numbers coming.
Offense is gone, too. I mean,
it really is looking like some of the Zeeland West teams of old. And so I don't think that's a bad pick if that's what you're going with. But I'm going Mona Shores yet. I still think that the only loss being that close one to Rockford that we talked about, and we just talked about the potential Rockford had. So I think they're right in that same discussion.
Yeah, Mona Shores coming off Holland last week, and Zeeland West now with Holland this week. So they kind of had their quote-unquote bye week, and then Zeeland West handled business 38-0 against rival Zeeland East in the Bird Bowl there. So I'm going to stick Zeeland West. And I saw, I think many of you may be seeing online, what's it called? The goosepoop.io website that they have some different things going on that's come up in the last couple years. They've got some interesting stats and different things they do that are fun to look at sometimes. And they, I believe, and I might be quoting this wrong, I think if they weren't one, they're at the top, but essentially Zeeland West is like number one in their kind of like Division III matrix that they have right now. And if they aren't one, they're right at the top, but I think they were one. So what I say last week is that when we've seen Coach Shillito's teams, when they're playing defense this way, when the offense is rolling the way it is, they go on state championship runs. And so far, I've seen nothing to the contrary out of that. And you know what? We're going to get them against Muskegon, get them against Mona Shores. I mean, Muskegon, I don't even know what that matchup is anymore at this point in time. I mean, they really struggled this week again. And was it Reese Puffer?
I believe so, yeah.
Reese Puffer hung with him. And again, Reese Puffer looks pretty good so far on the year. They're a playoff team. I think they're 2-1 now. But, man, I don't know. That's a team that I thought was far away the best team in the area, whatever, number one. So that's interesting for certain to see what's happened there. So, yeah, OK Green will be really interesting to watch. And I think it's one of those two down the stretch. When they play each other, that's going to be heck of a ball game. But I've seen these Shillito teams. We went to a high school that played in their conference. When Shillito has these teams right, get out of the way because they're going all the way to Thanksgiving weekend. And I'm not going to quite call that shot again yet, but it's starting to look like one of those type of teams. okay, White. This is one that, like, we've tried to go different directions, and it just keeps answering the question for us because now Byron Center lost to Forest Hill Central, so you're going to have to keep the Rangers P1.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of nice getting that matchup early on in the season. You kind of get things sorted out. I mean, it was still a close game, I believe, 8-point game there. So, I mean, we talked about, we saw Byron Center in person. I still think if we were looking at the playoff previews there, it looked like we could get a potential rematch. So, I mean, I still think Byron Center's a good team, but at this point, being 1 and 2, I have to take them out of discussion. But, yeah, I think Forest Hill Central, I'm sticking with Grand Rapids Christian as well.
Yep.
Another team I was going to mention. They had a tough loss to South Christian week 1 and now won back-to-back games. So I think they're kind of on the verge there, but not going to put them ahead of Forest Hill Central.
Lowell, too. You know, we talked about
yes.
them just a minute ago. They look good. They look physical. They look back to being some of the old Noel Dean. Of course, Noel no longer here, but kind of some of those type of football teams again this year. So that's out there. So we said Forest Hill Central has to be one, but there's some other things in there.
Mm-hmm.
I think I picked Grand Rapids Christian before the season started because I was so impressed with them at the end of last year. Now they're starting to put the pieces together. So this one's still interesting, but for the time being, I think gets us a little bit of certainty. OK Gold. So last week we just talked about how Grand Rapids Catholic Central was untouchable. They'd won 96-5, and Cedar Springs had them dead to rights. I mean, they had them beat in that game, and of course, just at the end, unable to get the 2-point conversion. They're trying to just win the football game at that point in time. So we've now seen the first chink in the Grand Rapids Christian or Grand Rapids Catholic Central armor at this point in time. Still stay atop of things. But we know how good South Christian is looming right behind there. That may not be the given that we thought it was going into this week.
Yeah, I mean, to think that we were talking about a change here in just a matter of a week's time is
Right.
Pretty wild to think about last week when we were doing this. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to knock them too much for a close win like that because they did still win the game. But yeah, we were talking about a Cedar Springs team that hadn't scored coming into the game, and to be that close,
insane too.
So I mean, yeah, I'm gonna leave Catholic Central 1, but I think I mean you're starting to have South Christian sneak into that conversation of one more week of a similar result, or if Catholic Central were to lose a game, you're talking about South Christian now being in a very close position to take the lead there.
West Catholic 41-6 over Spring Lake. That's how I get into the OK Blue discussions because that's where that's where it is. I mean, West Catholic we both had them won at the start of the year. They've maintained up there. Of course, Unity beat Coopersville, correct? That was that match. So Unity beat Coopersville. So we talked about it in the show. Wouldn't be surprised if they rattled off and won the rest of the year. And they're starting to work on it. Coach Tibby's team, of course. But at this point in time, West Catholic has to remain 1 because what they continue to show us.
Yeah, I think this is one that we both had at the beginning of the season, and I think that I'm not going to say it's a runaway win for West Catholic, but it's starting to look like one that's maybe going to sort itself out a little bit earlier than the rest. West Catholic's looked like the best team so far. You start looking at the teams right behind them, and you've got Unity Christian that started off 0-2. Now they're 1-0 in conference play, and of course could go on a run like we've seen them, and they could be right in this discussion. But then you're talking about Holland Christian and teams like Hamilton, who just lost to Holland Christian, and so a lot of teams that are kind of more, for me at least, in the middle of the pack that are probably going to beat each other up. And I think the only team that stands out so far has been West Catholic.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I still wonder. I think what you said last week. Coopersville is the team that I think gives them an interesting game, and then Unity Christian is Unity Christian. Like we know not to count them out. OK Silver wrapping up. I don't know what to do here. So we have to start. We each had Comstock Park. We've had Comstock Park 1 pretty much since the beginning of last year, except for 1 week when Chandler had Sparta as the top team in his OK Silver. Sparta looks terrible the first couple weeks of the year, really. And now they played some tough teams, but they don't look very good the first couple weeks of the year. So they beat Comstock Park 34-0. So, okay. So now I guess I don't know where you go exactly with that. I think, for me, I'm going to go Belding because they beat Kelloggsville 62-6. They're the unbeaten team. But now, I mean, from dead, Sparta's crawling back up in there. There was a reason. Again, 2 tough teams that they played. But, I don't even know. This is always a toss-up. I don't know here ever. But still, I don't know. I'm going to put Belding 1, I guess. But, I mean, Sparta's 1-2, but maybe they deserve it. I don't know.
Yeah, I think this is some of my finest reverse jinx work that I've done. For those that know me, I kind of have a tendency to somehow do that. If I say a team's dead, all of a sudden, boom, they're back. And if things are really rolling here, then a team falls apart pretty quickly.
People saw the Unity show last week.
Yes. Yep. So I don't know. Whatever I did, I sparked some life into Sparta by knocking them off from the first place vote here. But No, I mean, I was thinking the same thing. Belding being 3-0, they scored over 160 points.
One of the top 5 scoring offenses in the state.
Yep, I think the only thing that I was seeing is a combined 3-6 record for opponents. Okay, so that's my only knock against them. So I mean, it's a complete toss if I'll be completely honest here. So. I'm almost tempted to just stick with Comstock Park and say that was a fluke against Sparta. But
you could, but they lost by, 5 touchdowns.
Yeah, I know. It was a not overly close game. So, it's completely up in the air, but I would have to lean Belding as well.
Yeah, okay. That sounds good. We'll see. That'll sort itself out. All right. 6:30 p.m. on Friday, MichiganSportsRadio.com/MGN. Our Twitter, our Facebook will be on the Grandville Athletics YouTube. It's homecoming Grandville, West Ottawa. Can't wait for it. Going to be a terrific game. Thanks for tuning in to another edition of the Tailgate Report, a long edition, I think, as well, of the Tailgate Report. We'll see you all Friday night. Grandville, West Ottawa should be a really good one on homecoming.